The AGSI annual conference underway in Westport, County Mayo. Concerns are being raised around long-term Garda suspensions, growing online abuse of members and increasing pressures on policing resources. Garda sergeants and inspectors want the urgent introduction of independent oversight for members suspended from the force. The AGSI is making the call as it queries the process around long-term suspensions. And AGSI President Declan Higgins wants suspensions to be reviewed independently.
The system is unfair. It's about fairness and natural justice. What we're calling for is clear and structured time-bound suspension process. And most importantly, what we're seeking is independent reviews and oversight of the suspension policies. And what I mean by that is, if a member has been suspended for, say, 6 months or 12 months, that an independent body will come in and have a look and see why is this person still suspended.
That is the AGSI President Declan Higgins there. And for more on this, we're joined now by Clare's AGSI representative, the Ennis-based Detective Sergeant Brian Howard. Brian, good to speak to you again. Thanks for being with us.
Alan, thanks very much for having me on.
So, look, there's quite a number of issues, I suppose, that are being raised by the AGSI, and that one there that Declan Higgins is talking about, independent oversight of Garda suspensions, and I suppose really brought into focus in light of the recent, penalty points fixing case and so on. Do you and other members believe the current system is unfair to Gardaí who may ultimately be cleared of wrongdoing?
Yeah, and I suppose we're here in Mayo at our annual delegate conference. Along with the National Executive, we have 165 delegates here that will be raising various issues. But the whole suspension policy would be very high in that agenda, to be honest. And I suppose really it's not the suspension itself, it's the whole policies, the investigative process around these suspensions. And I suppose it's safe to say at this juncture that AGSI has no confidence in the current suspension policies within the Garda Síochána, and is calling for, and I suppose has called for some time, for urgent review, urgent introduction of independent oversight for members suspended for prolonged periods. And I suppose when we mentioned prolonged periods, and Declan referenced it there, 6 months, 12 months, ideally we'd be looking for a review body, whether that is the policing authority or maybe more ideally, maybe a panel chaired by a retired judge, perhaps, a panel of 3, to review investigations that reach a 12-month period. And just to, I suppose, to ascertain what has been done to date with relation to investigation, how it is progressing and what steps are outstanding and what is the likely timelines in relation to the conclusion of this investigation. And I suppose that's where the frustration is, that, these investigations that we have seen in relation to high-profile cases are going on year after year after year. And delegates have no knowledge of when they're going to be concluded. It's just a matter, there's no governance, no accountability, no kind of clear timelines in relation to when this suspension will be concluded. And if I make a comparison between our own, as investigators ourselves as Gardaí, if we're tasked with investigating, whether it's a road traffic accident or crime or whatever it is, we are complied to have certain timelines. And if we go in a year or 2 years or 3 years to investigate a fairly routine investigation, we would have Garda management all over us and would be subject to discipline. So why, when the shoe is on the other foot, are, the investigators, FISRU or whatever, why are they not subject to the same timelines that we as investigating Gardaí are? And we are just calling on, it's a question of governance, fairness, due, timely process. What is going on at the moment is not consistent with natural justice, and it's a matter of total unfairness. And it's just really about having these timelines so members know where they stand.
And long-running cases, such as the one I mentioned earlier, the most high-profile in recent years, Brian, what kind of effect does that have on morale within the force?
Absolutely. These members' lives are, put on hold more or less. The stress and anxiety that brings on them, on their partners, wives, husbands, their family, their children, it's a massive, it's unbelievable amount of stress and anxiety, and they're in the unknown. Nobody knows where they're going, how long they're going to be out. And as we have seen in these high-profile cases, 6, 7 years is not acceptable in any grounds, and wouldn't be acceptable if members of the public were being treated like this. So why our members are being subject to these prolonged periods of investigation causing undue hardship and anxiety and stress on the members themselves. And, it has a ripple effect, and it is very deteriorating.
Yeah, another major concern, which I've mentioned already, Brian, that the AGSI is highlighting is online abuse, calling for urgent action to tackle the escalating, targeted and vile abuse of members of An Garda Síochána online. From your perspective or experience, how bad is it? The AGSI saying there's been a sharp rise in the number of Gardaí reaching out for support because of online abuse. What have you seen anecdotally?
Yeah, I suppose there's two aspects to this social media abuse. I suppose the one is a bit more public, that people would be aware of, where mobile phones are shoved in the face of Garda members who are just trying to carry out their duties, and making these recordings, editing the recordings and posting them a lot of times totally out of context. There's no other profession that are subject to this sort of frustration, intimidation of mobile phones we put in their face for people that are just carrying out their duty. That would be the more public side of it. I suppose the more non-public side of it, and has risen over the last couple of years, and certainly in the last 6 months to 12 months, is the whole targeting of members online, character assassinations on specific members, where members themselves are identified, their family members are identified, their homes are identified, their children are identified. And we have one case, that the child of a member who was working in a fast food restaurant, that these individuals entered these premises for no other purpose but to intimidate. So it's not acceptable. It's causing massive undue anxiety on the members. And yes, we're calling on the support of government, the support of Garda management, guidance, protection members be put in place. Garda are entitled to the exact same protections. It should be entitled to the exact same protections as any other member of the public or any other employee. And I know that a past commissioner carried out or initiated a policy in relation to online abuse of politicians. And we are asking on the current commissioner to extend this policy to include Garda members, because, it has increased. I think we've currently possibly 9 or 10 cases that have come up in the last 6 months alone. And, very similar to the whole suspension policy, it causes massive anxiety to the members themselves. So we're looking for cooperation of the government, cooperation with Garda management to engage more with these social media platforms, to put a policy in place that we have certainly more controlled, because we have very little at the moment. It's very difficult to try and get these posts back down off these social media platforms, as we are well aware. So
yeah, and Brian, that's my concern about this. Like, it is totally understandable why Gardaí want this dealt with, why you want Commissioner Kelly and the government to, issue a clear policy on how Gardaí should deal with the situation and to engage with the social media platforms. But just unfortunately, previous evidence with social media companies in relation to dealing with issues on their platforms has been unsatisfactory, to say the least. Would you have any optimism at all that any engagement from Commissioner Kelly or the government with the social media platforms will actually result in positive actions in relation to abusive content involving members of the force?
Yeah, I suppose you will know that we met Commissioner Kelly a number of weeks ago, and I would have spoke to you about this, and this issue was raised at that meeting as well. And he is very cognizant of the issues, and in fairness, he's very empathetic of what's going on, and has undertaken to put measures in place to try and tackle this problem and try and address the whole social media platforms and try and introduce some sort of engagement to try and engage with the social media platforms to try and get them to insist on them removing this. It's not happening at the moment. We all know, even in the private sector, trying to get these posts down on social media platforms is almost impossible. And the Gardaí are having similar problems with social media problems. So we're trying to insist on the government and on the Commissioner. We will be reiterating that again today with him in the hope that he will try and progress this for us.
Brian, there are other concerns that AGSI members have around resources, policing capacity. I suppose Ireland's upcoming presidency of the EU could potentially lead to Garda resources already being stretched even further. I know the housing crisis is one. I suppose nobody escapes that. I'm sure that's having an impact on recruitment or retention within the force. All these issues being discussed in Westport. What's the feeling now into day two? Is there a positivity that some or all of these issues will be resolved, or at least a pathway will be laid out as to how ultimately they will be resolved or dealt with?
Yeah, well, with the Minister of Justice here was yesterday. In fairness, he did come across very positively. He did associate with our concerns that we have and undertook to try and progress them. From a recent meeting with the Commissioner, and I'm sure today will be no different, we get a very positive vibe from Commissioner Kelly. He is a member of Garda Síochána himself, coming up to the ranks. He's aware of the operational challenges that are out on the ground, and he's aware of the current challenges that we have in relation to resources, and as you mentioned, the EU presidency coming up, and housing crisis, and so on and so forth. So there is a confident vibe there, I would say that, and we were looking forward to the address of the Commissioner this afternoon to our delegates, and hopefully that they will sense the same positivity that we have out of our most recent meeting with him.
Okay, we'll see what emerges from that, but certainly the initial rumblings and your dealings with Commissioner Kelly seem to be positive. Brian, a pleasure having you on to get a sense of what's going on. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ellen. Thanks very much.
Take care. That is Brian Howard, Ennis-based Detective Sergeant, and also Clare's AGSI representative with us on Tuesday's Morning Focus.